Welcome to the Awesome Marriage Podcast. We are so glad to be with you today. And today we're talking about choosing your battles. How well do you do with choosing your battles in marriage? If you're struggling with recurring conflict, you might need to work on choosing your battles. On the other hand, if you're feeling resentful and you're not sure how to address it, well, you might need to work on choosing your battles. So today, Dr. Kim is going to help you learn how to choose your battles well in marriage. Stay tuned all the way to the end of today's episode to hear about an awesome freebie we have to help you with conflict. But before we dive into the topic, I want to make sure you know that we do have a couples conversation guide for every podcast episode. And this is just to make discussing and applying what you hear super easy for you and your spouse. And the kind of marriage hack is if you want to discuss it with your spouse, you just forward them the conversation guide and get the conversation going. It's pretty easy to do. So you can get this guide at awesomemarriage.com/podcast, or you can get it delivered straight to you each week in Dr. Kim's Marriage Multiplier email. So if you're not already signed up for that, I highly encourage you to take advantage of his quick weekly email with simple steps to invest in your marriage. You can find the link to sign up in today's show notes or at awesomemarriage.com. So, Dr. Kim, let's dive in. What struggles do you see couples facing when it comes to choosing their battles in marriage?
Well, I think every couple's gone through this deal and we certainly did. At the time in our marriage, we thought we're fighting about everything and anything. It was just like, I don't know. It was just like, I think it was the whole deal. We were trying to change each other, and so we were fighting about everything. So I think a lot of things that where couples don't choose battles well, what is something that's just kind of a minor, just kind of annoys you, but it's not a really important issue? Is that really something that you want to bring up? Can you just let go of that? Because it seems like most couples, a lot of the fights are over small things that in the long run, in the big picture of their marriage, probably don't really matter. And so we focus on those, and sometimes we focus on more of those than maybe some significant issues in our marriage, in our relationship that would make a difference if we really sat down and talked and spent time working about that. A couple of things that I love, and both of these I've said probably many times, but I think the deal of should it be said, be said by me, and should it be said now? If you take time to go through that, I think that would give you a filter. And then I think James 1:19 is the template over conflict that makes a difference. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. So following those make a difference. And I think maybe for me, that helped me kind of recenter and think, okay, what is really important here? And is it just because Nancy left something out or I left something out? Is that something we really want to fight over or do something like that? And I think too, the other thing I think, and I kind of alluded to the first one, talked about changing each other. We are different and we're different for a reason. And I think sometimes we want to fight those differences instead of learning to embrace those differences. And why is this person that way? And why did God bring us together? And what does God want me to learn? And so I think we miss some opportunities sometime by not choosing our battles well. So those are the things that I see that are kind of recurring, and I see in a number of couples. And I just think it's something that we all can do. And where I get concerned is I think some couples just get into almost a habit with it. And you got to break that habit and get away from it, because that is not going to take you where you want your marriage to go at all. It puts a big wall, a barrier between closeness and intimacy and all kinds of other things.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, that's so true and so relatable. I mean, I know we've come from a similar background of getting married and just saying, no, I'm going to fix you. Don't worry. I've got this. I'm going to fix you.
Yes.
Yeah. Just all you got to do is just listen and then do my way and it'll be fine. And, I can't tell you how many fights we had over things that we made it into a fight, like the right way versus wrong way to load the dishwasher, right way versus wrong way to cook the eggs, right way versus wrong way, all these things that are not right or wrong. And we were so stuck on, no, we both have to do this the same way. We have to agree on it. And you don't have to. You actually don't have to.
No. I think there's things that you agree to disagree on and things that you just, why does that matter? Why does it matter? Like I've had couples and we used to have a little trouble with how the dishwasher was loaded. So I just quit loading the dishwasher. I mean, and when I do put something in, it's like if it's just mine and I ate late and I just got a plate and a glass, well, I know where she wants those to go. Yeah. But, instead of getting mad at her because she rearranged the dishwasher, I thought, She probably knows better than I. The dishes
Mhm.
come out great when she does it. So why argue about that? But
Right.
it's one of those things that you can argue about. And then you look
Yes.
back later and you think, well, was that really important? No, not at all.
Yeah. No,
The
I
purpose
mean,
is
the number of couples I've heard share this same struggle, it's like it's a real
it's
thing.
amazing. It's
It is.
like, and maybe I don't know. I didn't read the booklet, I guess, if there's a right way, so that's fine with me.
Okay, but does Nancy appreciate you not loading it? Is that a good thing in her book?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
got it.
Definitely. And sometimes, I will clean up. And I know our difference is she tries to put a lot more in it than I do. I don't care
Sure.
if it's half full. I want to run it, get them done.
Mhm.
And so I know where she likes things to go. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, like if I clean up dishes after dinner, yeah, I know where to do that. But in the
yeah,
big picture, she likes to do it. It's something she enjoys doing. And so
yeah,
I'll love her being able to do
yeah, yeah.
that.
I'm on Team Nancy with this one. You gotta really Tetris those guys in there and make it worth the wash, but, my policy now is like well, the way we operate is whoever's doing the dishes gets to do the dishes. Like, if you're doing it, do it your way. That's fine. And so, we have different times that we'll each take that responsibility, and it's like, if you're doing it, by all means, you do those dishes. I don't need to touch them.
Well, and like the stuff the guy who, when we built this house and bought the dishwasher, I mean, they're talking about this dishwasher, you can throw things in with 10 days of grime on it and it'll clean it. So I'm thinking it's going to get clean either
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
The thing is going to it's going to do its job.
Yes.
But I think Nancy's orderly. And I think a lot of ways she loads it is the way she puts the dishes up afterwards. If she's the one
Mhm.
that unloads it, or if I unload it, I just start grabbing stuff. I get it unloaded, but she kind of has a system she goes through.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and these are the things where it's like, okay, we just learn how to avoid making that into a fight by finding another way of handling it. So I think those kind of
Right.
tension points where you don't have to make it a fight, that's exactly what we're leaning into today. Is like, where do we not need to make things a fight, and we can just live a happier marriage as a result.
Absolutely. Things that
Yeah.
don't matter.
Yeah, yeah. So, in light of that, I mean, we know every marriage will have conflict. Conflict itself isn't the problem. We just don't need unnecessary conflict or unhelpful conflict. So, are there any hills worth dying on in marriage, like issues where it's best to really stand your ground?
I think it comes to faith and values. If those are
Mm,
really crossed, I think that's something that we stand our ground on. This is
mm-hmm,
what I believe. This is why I believe it. I think when we agree on boundaries in a
mm-hmm,
marriage with a couple, which we've talked a lot about boundaries and how they can
mm-hmm,
help a marriage. And so if a spouse disrespects those boundaries, I
mm-hmm,
think that's something that needs to be brought up and talked about again, because that was
mm-hmm,
something that's starting out you agreed on. I think faithfulness is a hill to stand on, that
mm-hmm,
there's no compromise. I've got interesting over the last few years, I've heard a number of people that try to compromise. Well, I'm just talking to that person, this and that there are lines you just don't cross in
mm-hmm,
marriage that have to do with faithfulness. Parenting, just did a podcast this morning with someone on a different podcast on parenting and how different that can be. And so
mm-hmm,
I think what I would say in that is not be critical of each other in that, but learning to come together and set your own model for parenting that you both agree on,
mm-hmm.
instead of just keeping, well, I don't know why you're doing it that way, or why did they're not supposed to have that food at this age, or
Right, right. Mm-hmm,
all those kind of things. So I think those are some of them that I would say. Finances probably can fall into that too. If you're really struggling with finances and one person is maybe hiding some charges or doing some things like that, there's just all some things. I think it's just learning to what is really important. How does this affect both of us? How does it affect our marriage?
mm-hmm.
Is it getting us where we want our marriage to go? And if it's not, then it's probably something you need to talk about for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Man, you brought up a lot of good points. And I love one thing you brought up, which was things you agreed on.
Yeah.
Like staying faithful to agreements you made, boundaries you set. It sounds like budget you agreed upon, all these kind of things that you've agreed upon, or things that really do affect one another. Those
Right.
matter.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And the thing is, we talk a lot about having time together as a couple to talk through things, to come up with plans, to talk about, we talked today about parenting and having kind of an
Mm-hmm.
overall plan for what you want your kids to experience in the 18 years you're in your home.
Mm-hmm.
And so if all of a sudden one parent is doing things that don't line up with that vision or that goal you agreed on, well, that's something you want to talk about. If it
Mm-hmm.
finances, we got our budget, and this person is going outside the budget all the time, and it's
Mm-hmm.
causing a hardship on the finances in the marriage. Those are things you want to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Yes. And that doesn't have to be a battle.
No.
I don't believe.
No, I don't think so. I think it depends on, if it's, say, in our situation, say we have a budget, I'm the one who's gone outside of it. And
Mm-hmm.
Nancy comes and says, hey, we need to talk about this budget. You're going over, it looks like as we go through the spending, you're going over that much. Can we sit down and talk about it?
Mm-hmm.
And then you sit down and talk about it, and I can say, yeah, I messed up. I didn't do it. But what happens sometimes when you do that, you've done your part in presenting it in the correct way, but your
Mm-hmm.
spouse may get defensive. Your
Yeah.
mouth kind of say, well, remember when you bought this back in,
Right.
whatever, 2010,
Yeah.
and so you've got to have those conversations. You've got to both be willing to listen to each other and address the issue.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true. And I think that willingness, gosh, that would go a long way in this whole conversation, like that could really, really help
Absolutely.
things.
Like getting defensive just doesn't
Mm-hmm.
ever work.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it's, I get it if someone says you're a jerk and you say, no, I'm not a jerk. I mean, there's certain things but if you're really trying to communicate with your spouse and you want them to listen, you want to listen to them, if you present it in a good way, then the other spouse, you want them to respond in a healthy way and not get defensive.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I struggled with that. Like when you're talking about, hills to die, and you brought up the issue of finances. I had a really hard time with just coming on board and staying on board with the budget when we were early in marriage. And it really mattered because we really needed to stay on budget because there just wasn't not any wiggle room at that time. But I just had a really hard time just being careless and not paying attention. I wasn't used to, needing to pay attention to it in this way when it was just me. I kind of knew where everything was going. And so that was just really hard for me. So Brian would have to sit down and be like, hey, I noticed that you went over here and there, and what's that about? And I'd be like, well, I just wanted to, because I just,
at least you were honest.
Can't you understand? I just really wanted to. And he was like, so I would get defensive because I didn't want that taken away from me. That's how I felt at the time. I was just struggling to stay on board, and I wanted to be, but I just was having a hard time really getting there. And so that was something that we had to, really work through to get on the same page. And it took a while, but that was an issue. It was like, it's pretty cut and dried. We're going to have to stay on the same page with this, even though it was difficult.
Yeah, I think as you were saying that and looking at the other things that we talked about, there's probably when we cross those lines, there is a bit of selfishness in it. Whether it's finances, whether it's boundaries. Well, I agreed to those boundaries, but this is affecting me different than I thought it would. So I'm crossing that boundary, so a lot of those faithfulness, all those things really kind of end up being a little bit selfish.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a problem, and helping us to be able to talk about those things, being able to listen to each other and being willing to set our selfishness aside. Because for me, that's probably been the biggest problem in our marriage. There's always been selfishness, and I'm so much better than I used to be. But boy, sometimes it can rear its head and it's like, wow, I'm back to ground zero.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah. And it's along with that too, the selfishness. And then, I kind of just confessed to doing this without explaining it. But in those times I was being selfish, but I also was kind of justifying it to myself. Like, oh, I feel like this is okay. I feel okay about this breach of trust. I feel okay about this not sticking to the boundary. And so I would get defensive because I knew I was, trying to justify something that wasn't justifiable. So when I got caught on it, it really hit me where it hurt.
Yeah, because you'd convince yourself it was okay, kind of.
Right.
At least so you could go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Now he wants to talk about it?
Right.
No.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah. Well, so I'm curious, have you and Nancy ever run into an issue like that?
Oh, I think that, we did, like I said, we fought about a lot of things early on. And I think a lot of our fights were because I had this wife mold and she had a husband mold, and we were trying to figure out how to fit each other into it, and realizing that once we did, our lives, that person's life is going to be so much better. Why are they so resistant to this, But I think sometimes we have an issue like with maybe little things like maybe clothes on the floor or crumbs on the counter or things like that we might make an issue that really shouldn't be an issue. And so one of the things that we do pretty regularly is if it's important to me, even if it's her clothes, I'll just pick them up in the not in the trash. That's what I had one mom do with her kids, their teen that left clothes out. She just put them in a bag and she didn't throw them away, but she said, "You're not getting these back for a while,"
Wow.
But that's aside. But I think, yeah, I put it in the dirty clothes basket. Or I think some of the things that really helped us, because there are things that are important to Nancy that really aren't important to me. Now I try to make them important, but some of the little things like that, I mean, you're going to fight because she left, I don't know, socks on the floor. Well, no. And if it bugs me, then I'm going to pick them up, put them away, and I'm not going to resent that. And I've learned to turn that into serving her. It's made a huge difference for me. And when you're both doing that, which is where we are now, if one person's doing it all the time, there can be some resentment. But if you're both kind of great with that, if it bugs me and it's not that big a deal, I'm going to just do it for you. If she gets like desk all day, there's a coffee cup. I've never remembered to take it, but in the sink. And so about middle of the afternoon, she'll come in and go, "Through your coffee?" And I'll go, "Yeah." And so she'll pick up the cup and take it because she don't want it sitting there like that. And so I think that's it. I think one of the things as I was thinking through that question that I really think has helped us a lot, I think really does go back to our faith. I don't know that we ever got a hill that we felt like was worth dying on. I think that we tried to align. We would pray about things. I'm talking about important things. We finally came to the realization that God was not going to tell me one thing and Nancy something else. And so we took things to him in prayer. And so I really had trouble thinking of a hill that we really felt worth dying on. I think and I think I started thinking, why? Because we had so many differences, but we never had that one that it's like, I'm putting a stake in the flag in the ground and I'm standing here till you figure it out. And I really do think it was our faith that helped us keep from getting there, because we take to God in prayer, and it was like, I don't know, it helped us listen to each other better, be willing to compromise, maybe God helped us see things from the other's perspective a little more. And so I don't think we did.
That's really cool. That's a cool way to look at it, because you're right. God's not going to speak different things to each of you. He's for your unity. He's going to bring you more together.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I think it really makes a difference. It made a difference for us for sure.
Yeah. And so I think that's a really cool way to look at it. And I also still want to give gravity to the things you mentioned before that are really worth fighting for, standing firm on. If there are boundaries you've set, all those kind of things that are really important to you, or protecting the faithfulness in your marriage, these things you guys have agreed on together, just knowing that it's okay to hold firm to those things that are for the protection of your marriage, and, to see that you're in this together. That's valuable as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. We've talked a lot more about boundaries in other episodes, so we don't need to get totally off on that topic, but I will link those in the show notes if you are interested in hearing more about that topic, because we've got lots of good stuff for you. Okay. So the question that I run into a lot personally with friends, with, people I talk to, they just don't know. How do you know if something is worth bringing up, or if you just need to let it go?
I think if it's a recurring issue, that you see continues to affect your relationship, or if something like that, then I think, okay, what's that? Maybe we should look at that, because it's something that I maybe tried to let go of, prayed about, and it keeps coming up. So I'm thinking it's important for us to talk about that. What's your motive? Are you under stress? Are you having stuff like that? Or is there really a problem there? What do you want out of that? And then I think the other thing that you can do is, what's going to happen if I bring this up? Is it going to be positive for our marriage? Is it going to help us grow our marriage? Is the potential benefit worth the conflict that might happen out of this? And so I think you can, now in some situations, I know some people have told me, well, I can't bring up anything because they're always going to get mad. And then I would say, in those situations, probably need to go to a counselor or you need somebody that can
Mhm.
help you with that. But just in general, it's okay to bring up something that might be a little uncomfortable if it's
Mhm.
something that really you do see affecting your relationship in a negative
Mhm.
way. And so I think too, the other thing that I think is important, timing is so important
Mhm.
because sometimes we bring up something, if Nancy's got some out of town clients she's showing houses to, and she's getting ready to gather up her stuff to go meet them, and I bring up something, well, that's a horrible time to bring that up,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
so it's make sure the timing is right. And I think sometimes it's better to just tell yourself, say, hey, I've got something that's really been bugging me. I've tried to deal with it. I think we need to talk about it. Can we do that? Set a time, and then hopefully the spouse will say yes. And so just being willing to wait. I think sometimes we just blurt things out or we say things and
Mhm.
catch our spouse off guard or in a bad time, and it's just not going to go well like that. So I think
Mhm.
those are important. So one thing that I try to do, one, I try not to react impulsively. Still have trouble with it at times,
Mhm.
but when I take time to pray, give it to God, let go of it myself. And then if that's still a problem, then I say, Nancy, this is something that I tried to let go of. When can we sit down and talk about this?
Mhm. Mhm.
And and so maybe that'll help going through it. I think just looking at yourself, looking what the problem is it gonna, I think the question of really, is it gonna make our relationship better
Mhm.
by talking about this? And if
Mhm.
it's not, maybe it's something that you need to talk to a counselor about.
Mhm.
Or you can say that, maybe it is something your husband or wife is doing that affects you. Certainly you want to talk about that, I don't know, when you raise your voice. I know
Mhm.
you don't think you're raising your voice because in
Hmm.
your job you have to talk loud because everybody, but that because of the home I grew up in, that really hits me hard. I've tried to not let it bother me, but it does. Can we talk about when you walk in the door that you just kind of take it down a notch? I'm
Mm.
not saying
Mhm.
you're saying the wrong words. I'm just saying the tone of voice is something I haven't been able to get past.
Mm.
Sure, bring that up and talk about it.
Mhm. Mhm. And I appreciate you modeling that for us because I think just getting a real clear example of how to say that, because the way you did that, it's okay, I have this problem, not you are the problem,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. It makes it so, and you want your spouse to hear what you're saying.
mhm.
And we talk a lot about being a student of your spouse. So you want to say what you're going to say if it's important to you in a way that your spouse can hear and
Yes.
maybe very different than you need it said to you. And so I think that's where being a student of your spouse helps. But taking responsibility first for your part in it and then asking for what you need,
Mhm.
usually that can go pretty well.
Yes. Yeah. Mhm. That's good. That's a really good point. And then to your point too about timing. I mean, that's just huge.
Yeah.
I have a very firm rule about nine. I do not make plans after 9 o'clock. So if my kids ask, "Can I do this? Can I do that?" I'm like, "No, I'll talk to you tomorrow. I cannot think. I'm not going to get my calendar out. I'm chilling. I'm not going to
I'm
commit to
done.
something." And
Done for
so
this day. Yeah.
yes, like my thinking has finished. So
Yeah.
kind of the same with like bringing things up. I botched this recently. I was like, we'd had like a late night. I don't know what we were doing, but it was just late, and we're just kind of like wrapping up the last couple things before bed. And I had just had a really really mentally taxing week, so my brain was just like kind of it was totally done. It was past the 9 o'clock rule, and Brian said it just like hit me wrong, and I just like snapped back at him, and gosh, and it was like this was truly just it was just a product of the timing. I was too tired. I was too like drained. I should not have
Yeah.
said anything, but all those things just came together in perfect storm of bad.
Yep.
And I was like kicking myself, like, why did I let that come out sideways? But really, what it was something that I should have addressed in an appropriate way sooner. But because I never did bring it up in an appropriate way, it kind of had built up and then it just
Yeah.
exploded out. And it was like, I wish I could take that back. That was not good. Because you never know when you're going to be in that moment when things have just kind of pushed you past your edge, when you don't really have that, good filter on anymore.
Absolutely. And that's such a good point because I think we've all experienced that at one point or
Hmm.
the other. Yeah. And I think, we try to, like, if I've had a really hard day at the counseling center and I come in, I try to let Nancy know that.
Hmm.
And I think that just helps her know probably what I'm capable of at that point or not, not
Yeah.
as an excuse, but it's just kind of the reality. So if she's got something that is important, she'll probably say, I did have something I want to talk about. Let's talk about tomorrow night or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
So I think just being aware of your spouse, kind of putting yourself in their shoes really,
Yeah.
really helps. And I get it. We can't always do that. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
easier with me coming the door at night to do that as I've been around
Mm-hmm.
each other all day and everything. And you don't realize, Brian didn't realize how tired you were and
Mm-hmm.
exhausted you were. And then something like that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's a great point, just to go ahead and let your spouse know how you're coming
Yeah.
in. That's really helpful.
Yeah. I think it does. And so if
Mm-hmm.
you do that for each other
Mm-hmm.
and respect that with each other, it really works. Because if she does the same thing, if she's been out showing causes to clients all day, and maybe there's some frustrations that happened at some places they showed and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, and she can just say, hey, this was really a lot rougher today, a lot harder or more
Mm-hmm.
taxing than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Great. I need to know that. And then I can serve her. And that's
Yeah.
what God's taught me is I can say, well, why don't you let me go pick up dinner tonight? You were going to
Mm-hmm.
rush out and pick something up. Let me go pick it up. And,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe I do a few other things just to make it a little easier for her. And then what
Mm-hmm.
I find is then when I have that day, she's doing the same thing for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I wish we could do that all the time. It is a great place to get to.
Yeah. Yes.
That's that symbiotic relationship. That's where you're both indispensable to the life and well-being of each other. Still have your own identity,
Mm-hmm.
but you're really working together on things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. That's such a good picture of how to use that for good. Use that
Yeah,
knowledge for good.
absolutely.
That's really cool. So, okay, so if you're running into a recurring issue and you know that it's something that's bothering you, but you want to overlook it and give grace, but then you just can't let it go. What do you do?
I have learned to ask myself, why can't I let it go?
Mm,
Is it because something was unresolved? It really wasn't resolved.
mm-hmm.
Uh, it's something that repeats itself. Is there a deeper issue there? And so I can look at myself, what were my expectations, those kind of things. And then, what is it? Why can't I do that? And then I pray about it. And then
Mm-hmm.
try to get to a point where through that process that God leads me to forgiving and moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if there's something that really was unresolved that we need to readdress, great. But I think sometimes it comes to me that I need to look at myself
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
at that. And then because I usually it in our marriage, it really comes back to me.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nancy thinks it's resolved. Or it was something that I just thought, this is no big deal. This is one of those
Mm-hmm.
hills I'm not going to die on. I'm going to give
Mm-hmm.
grace. And then I can't let go of it. Then, okay, why can't I let go of it? I want to understand that. And then if I want to talk to her about it, then I can tell her why I couldn't let go of it, of why
Mm-hmm.
it was. And so that gives her more information about me
Mm-hmm.
that helps her think in working through things with me,
Mm-hmm.
if that
Yeah,
makes
that's it.
sense.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because then that can help both of you.
Right. It's because
Mhm.
it goes back to the team and working together and learning
Mhm.
about each other. And if you keep that in front of you, it just changes the way you approach things.
Mhm.
This is not your enemy. This is
Yeah.
not somebody that is determined to make your life miserable. That's just not true.
Right. Right.
You
Yeah.
just get
And
married for that.
if you treat him like that, then you're going to have a lot of these battles that you don't
Yep.
need to have.
Yep.
A lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So is that something you've experienced when you've run into, I mean, obviously explain your process for you. So you've obviously experienced this. What was that like? What was the situation? How'd you handle it? How'd you resolve it?
It's interesting that something kind of happened recently with us. I think it was last week, and we were playing pickleball. We got some teams friends we play with, and we weren't playing on the same team. Nancy and I, early marriage, realized we could not do board games together. We could not do anything competitive together. When we played tennis, we could not play against each other. We're just too competitive, and it just would bleed all over our marriage. So she was playing with another person. I was playing with somebody else, and we're playing against each other. They were way ahead of us, and we'd come back and win. And I made some really good shots, and they happened to be shots that she couldn't get to. And so I saw this look, and she was angry. And she was I just had touched that competitive
Oh
deal
no.
in her. And so, usually after something like that, usually we're both quick to apologize. It's the be angry and do not sin. She didn't say anything. It was just, I can just tell in her countenance. And so, but she didn't. And I thought, oh, that's okay. I thought, I probably done the same thing before. But as one day turned into 2 and then 3, I was having trouble letting it go. Why in the world has she not apologized? And so that night I thought, okay, well, I'm going to bring it up tonight. Well, that night we got in bed and she looked at me and she said, I'm sorry about the other day, blah, blah, blah. We talked it through. And I think what we saw to that we both have to realize, especially because we love playing pickleball. We love friends we play with, but it can get competitive. But in the big picture that we're always on each other's team, even if we're not on each other's team. In other words, the big word team to the little word team. And so I think that showed me, and I don't know, I haven't really analyzed that much. I guess it was because her habit and my habit with her, we really try to clear the air quickly. And if something happens, we usually apologize and get past it. And so I guess it was just a difference that she didn't. Well, I think she was processing and dealing with some things, and she doesn't like it when she does that. She's worked really hard to kind of work on that over the years. And so I think looking back, she needed to kind of work through some things before she said something. It's great. It's great. But that's kind of an example of I was trying to give grace. I was trying to let go of it. It was hard for me. It was just, I couldn't believe it was just lingering there for a couple of days like that. It was interesting.
That is. And I love how that story ended too. I mean, that's just,
yeah,
that is pretty great.
And I think that, that wouldn't have ended that way probably 30 years ago, but it does today.
You've learned so much.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
That's great news. That's great news for those of us who have not been married for 54 years yet. And we're catching up.
Yeah. And you do, and I think you've got to look at marriage as this is a process. This is a marathon. It really is. And don't, I think I expected our marriage to be, we'll work through some things and we'll just coast. And that just doesn't happen that way. Or if you do, you're not going to learn the things God wants you to learn out of marriage. There's so much that God wants us to learn out of a marriage relationship. And you don't want to miss those things. And if you're fighting all the time, you're not learning anything.
And you're not having a very good time either. So
no, it's like, that's miserable.
Yeah, we should be learning from those mistakes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. That's so good. Well, so, we don't want to fight all the time, obviously, but we do want to be faithful to communicate well to our spouse. And so if we look at the Bible, it tells us both that love covers a multitude of sins, which is really helpful in marriage, but it also tells us that iron sharpens iron. So we want to be gracious, but we also do want to be able to speak into or even challenge our spouse when it's appropriate, or for them to speak into us and challenge us. So how do we navigate doing both of those?
Isn't it interesting when the Bible gives us two things and it's like we need to do both of them, but just like, how in the heck do we make these work like that?
Right.
So I struggled with it. And so I did some study and research and stuff like this. And this is what ended up making sense to me. So when you're talking about love covers a multitude of sins, and that's from 1 Peter 4:8, I think. It focuses, I think Peter's talking about the power of love to forgive and to overlook minor offenses. It doesn't mean that we ignore serious issues, but we choose to extend grace for the little things that we're talking about, the battles that we don't need to fight. And so that made sense to me, that covered all those little things. And then the iron sharpens iron, Proverbs 27:17 talks about, I think, how our relationship refines each other's and how it can improve a marriage. And so part of that is lovingly being able to challenge each other with the purpose of we're growing and our marriage is growing. And so I think when we prayerfully apply both of those, you create this balance between grace and truth, where love does cover the multitude of sins, but also it kind of spurs each of us on to growth and maturity, which we want in Christ. We're to do that. And so it is a delicate balance. I think it's something that, we have to really think about, be aware of, be wise, be humble. But I think it's committing to what God's design for marriage is, because God's design for marriage covers both of those. They
Mhm.
very both fit in the template you want to place over your marriage. So I think it's a balance. And so I think we can do both. We just have to get that concept and then live it out with
Yeah.
God's help. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I mean, you're so right. It seems simple when you say that we want to grow. We all, I think, want to, but I think it can be hard to take that feedback or information from another person, especially our spouse, because it's just very personal. It's very
It
vulnerable
is.
because they know everything. They know too much. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting because what it makes me think of, just to brag on you, Dr. Kim, for a minute, with Awesome Marriage, you and then our COO, Christina, have created this great culture of feedback. And all know we're free to give the feedback needed because we have a shared goal of this ministry being the best it can be. Our goal is to reach people, to give hope, to help families and marriages. And so because we know where we're going, we are free to say, I don't think this is working. This is working great. This isn't working great. And to say the honest feedback that needs to be said to build up. So I know whenever I'm getting a piece of feedback from a team member, it's because they're helping. We're sharing this goal. And so that kind of takes away that defensiveness when you see feedback as a help instead of an
Yeah.
attack. And that's something I would love for marriages to be able to adopt as well.
Absolutely. And I think it is hard to get there, but I think
Yes.
and I think it's something we worked at and we finally realized we are both for our marriage and for each other. And so that we are this team and it's,
Hmm.
it'd go in and out of that. We have probably never done it perfect, but I know when Nancy shares something with me that she wants it to be better. She wants me to
Hmm.
be better. She wants our marriage to be better. I think you gave the example of our team, and I think Christina and I worked some of that out when she was the only person. It was the two of us.
Hmm.
And, she would, because I'd write something, and actually, I think you were probably editing then, but Christina was we were trying to figure out content and stuff. And she'd kind of throw something out, I think, to see how I took it, a little bit critical, but in a very nice way. And I think she realized that that's what I wanted.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
don't I've got two eyes. I like other eyes on things. I like when
Mhm.
you edit something and you say, I don't think this fits, or you need to explain this more, or
Mhm.
I think an example would be good. I love that because
Mhm.
it makes me grow and be better. And so
Mhm.
I think applying that to our marriage, it is different because we're so close
Mhm.
in marriage and so connected in so many ways. But when we're able to do that and be vulnerable and let our spouse share things that are for our good and
Mhm.
benefit, you can really see God do some amazing things with that.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
when we don't, we're missing out.
Yeah.
We're missing out. And a lot goes into it. Trust goes into it.
Mhm.
Trust that this person is not trying to control me. Trust
Mhm.
me that this person is really doing this for my best interest. Trusting that my spouse has been praying about this, and I really think this is something God's laid on her heart or his heart to
Mhm.
share with me. Getting there allows those kind of conversations, but it takes work. And it takes work
Yeah.
to stay there too, because the enemy
Mhm.
doesn't like that. He don't want your marriage to grow. He don't want your
Mm-mm.
marriage to get better. So he'll
Mhm.
throw some things at you too. But it's persevering to know, okay, what does God want? And that's always going to be good.
Yeah. That's really good. It's all that trust, but it's also the timing that we talked about and
Yep.
saying things in a tactful way. So it's a pretty powerful formula though.
Yeah. 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 Nancy confronted me on something the other day, and she was completely right. It was
Mm.
something I had said or done around some friends, and I didn't really realize, but she understood how they probably took it that I didn't
Mm.
see. And she was willing to bring that up, and I was
Mhm.
willing to listen to her. And I went, yeah, I can work on that.
Mhm.
That doesn't have to happen again,
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's cool that we're at that point,
Yeah.
or that she didn't go, you dummy. You
Yeah,
know what you
right.
did,
Right.
and
Right.
so that's not going to go anywhere either.
Yeah,
So
she didn't call you out in front of everybody. She just brought it up.
no,
Yeah.
no. Yep, yeah, did it. Yeah,
Yeah.
as we were leaving wherever we were. Yeah,
It's so valuable. I mean, it's so valuable to have somebody who has your back enough to help you with the things you can't
to love you.
see. Yeah.
That's why I tell people who, when you're talking about getting an accountability partner, you need to know to pick someone that loves you enough to get in your face
Yeah.
if you need your face gotten into,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah.
And certainly that's double or triple in marriage relationship. That
Mhm.
I love Nancy enough then I'm willing to share some things that may be difficult, but I think this is something that God wants me to share with her.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
the same, vice versa. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, Dr. Kim, this has been a really helpful and clarifying conversation. Do you have any final piece of advice on choosing battles well?
I just think I loved that we decided to do this. I think it came out of a podcast we did when I talked about that a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's something that we don't do real well in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Culture has a part in that, I think. And so I think it's isolating down just the two of you. How do you choose battles well with just the two of you?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to grow your marriage and what's not? What's going to help you get to the goals you've set for your marriage and what's not? And if it's on the what's not, don't do it.
Yeah.
Or discuss it. And if it's on the other, then that's not going to be the things that are good for your marriage. You keep doing those things. So think about it. It might be a good thing to sit down together to talk about. Maybe you say, hey, let's talk about the things that we argued about for the last week. Let's write them down.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's kind of a fun exercise. Well, you got to be willing to do it, but it can be a fun exercise, and so, and then you look at them, and I would guess that most of you are going to go, well, you're not even going to remember what it started, or you're going to think, oh my gosh, I can't believe we argued over that.
Right.
That was not very important. And if it isn't important, then it's like, did we resolve that?
Mm-hmm.
Are you okay with that? Did we get to a good place with that? Do we need to revisit it? Do we need to go? Is this something we need a counselor's guidance on a little bit, or a couple that we trust? Do we need to talk to them about it? So anyway, I hope it kind of spurs you to do some of those things, because I don't think you'll ever regret working on that, choosing your battles well, how to handle things, how to communicate those things to each other.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really good. I don't think so. I don't think you will. I really don't.
No.
Yeah. So I am thinking, just as we're finishing this conversation, this might bring up some questions for you. You might have some questions about this. You might have some practicalities to clarify, need some examples, other things of that nature. Just know our inbox is always open. You can always reach us at info@awesomemarriage.com. You can DM us on Instagram. We love hearing from you, and we love to answer questions. And we're always happy to put those things into our future podcast topic rotation. So feel free to reach out if you'd like to. I also want to remind you about the marriage multiplier that I mentioned earlier, which is where we have our couples conversation guide, which helps you to discuss what you have heard on today's episode. So you can sign up for that by using the link in the show notes today, or by going to awesomemarriage.com. And I want to let you know about an awesome free resource. Actually, we have two. We've got a conflict webinar that Dr. Kim teaches that you can attend for free. We will have the link in the show notes as well to sign up for that. We also have our conflict resolution cheat sheet. So if you only click one link today, you're going to want to go to the show notes, click on the link to get the free conflict resolution cheat sheet. And guess what? When you do that, you're also going to be automatically subscribed to the marriage multiplier. So you will get the couples conversation guide, quick little practical weekly email from Dr. Kim. It is just a wealth of knowledge and help for your marriage. Do not forget to find that link in today's show notes. We want to make everything that we talk about here really practical for you, and that is one of the best ways to do it. Thanks so much for joining us today, for sharing your time, and have a great day, and do something awesome for your marriage today.